you're not like the others. Most people would have looked away and moved on, but she couldn't. And what happened next revealed a truth that no one expected. It was a torrential rainy night in New York City. Marina, a 42-year-old billionaire businesswoman, was returning from yet another business meeting. The kind of rain that makes you want to dash home, bolt the door, and shut out the world. The streets were empty, save for those with nowhere else to go. And that's when she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. Meet the woman who built an empire from scratch. Someone who always prided herself on her ability to read people, to see beyond appearances. Sitting comfortably in the leather seat of her Mercedes, something outside the fogged window caught her attention in a way she never imagined. A boy. He couldn't have been more than 15, soaked to the bone, shivering in the cold night, holding a makeshift cardboard box over his head. But that wasn't what left her paralyzed. It was what he had in his arms. The boy was kneeling on the sidewalk, desperately trying to protect the children from the rain with his own thin body. The cardboard box was already soaked, falling apart. The baby's tears mixed with the rainwater on their little red faces. "Please," he cried out to the passing cars. "Anything. They're starving. Help us." Marina felt her heart tighten. She had seen poverty before. She had seen desperation. But this was different. Something was deeply wrong with that scene. Most people would have tossed a few coins out the window and moved on. Conscience relieved. Back to comfortable life. But Marina couldn't look away, because something about that boy was different. The way he scanned the street nervously. The way he cradled the babies with such fierce, deliberate care. He wasn't just a desperate street kid. There was calculation in his movements. A practiced routine. And Marina, with her razor-sharp instincts for reading people, immediately sensed something was off. And then she made a decision that would reveal a truth that no one was prepared to hear. "Stop the car," she told the driver. "Ma'am? Stop, now." The driver obeyed, parking a few meters away. Marina opened the door, feeling the cold rain hit her face. She grabbed her purse, pulled out some large bills, and walked up to the boy. When he saw her approaching, his eyes widened. He didn't expect anyone to get out of the car. He didn't expect anyone to come to him. "Here," Marina said, extending the money. "For the babies." The boy took the bills with trembling hands. "Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. God bless you." But Marina didn't turn to leave. Instead, she crouched down, looking directly into the boy's brown eyes. Eyes that seemed too old for that young face. "What's your name?" Hesitation. "Marcus, ma'am." "And these babies? Whose are they?" "My siblings. My mother. She's sick. Can't work. I take care of them." Lie, or perhaps truth mixed with lies. Marina wasn't sure. But her instinct, that same instinct that had made her one of the richest women in the country, was screaming that there was much more to this story. "Where do you live, Marcus?" The boy swallowed hard. His eyes darted away from hers. "Far from here. I need to go now. Thanks for the money." He got up quickly, adjusting the babies in his arms with a skill that revealed practice. Lots of practice. And then he started walking, fast, looking back every few steps as if afraid of being followed. Marina returned to the car. But when the driver started to drive, she said something she didn't even expect herself to say. "Follow that boy, slowly, keep your distance." "Ma'am, you heard me. Follow him." And so began a journey that would take her to places she never imagined. Because Marina knew something didn't add up in that scene. And she couldn't simply move on without discovering the truth. Marcus walked for several blocks. The rain continued to fall relentlessly. The babies eventually stopped crying, exhausted, asleep against the boy's wet chest. Marina watched from inside the heated car, her heart torn between admiration for his dedication and growing concern. The boy was very organized, very careful. He stopped at specific corners, looked around, adjusted the babies. It wasn't the chaotic behavior of someone desperate. It was almost like a routine. "He's done this before," Marina murmured to herself, "many times." And what she was about to discover would completely change her understanding of everything. After 20 minutes of walking, Marcus turned onto a quieter street. Modest houses, some with lights on, others already dark for the night. He stopped in front of a small house, with peeling walls but flowers in the window. A dim light shone through the curtains. Marina watched as he opened the door, no knock, no hesitation, like he owned the place. He entered, and in that fleeting moment before the door shut, she glimpsed a figure inside. An older woman. Grandmother? Mother? The details blurred in the dim light. "What do we do now, ma'am?" the driver asked. Marina remained silent, thinking. The babies were in that house. With whom? Why? If Marcus was really begging for alms to support his family, why all that elaboration? Why weren't the babies simply inside the house, safe and dry? And then something even stranger happened. 5 minutes later, Marcus left the house, alone, without the babies. He looked around warily, pulled the hood of his rain-soaked sweatshirt over his head, and resumed walking. Back toward the city center, Back to the bustling streets, but now without the babies. Now he was just a teenager walking in the rain. Nothing special. Nothing that would make people stop. Nothing that would generate immediate compassion. And suddenly, Marina understood. The babies were part of a performance, a carefully orchestrated show to touch people's hearts, to do exactly what it had done to her: stop, feel, give. But who was behind this? Who was using those innocent children? Who was forcing Marcus to do this? Or was she assuming too much? Was there something she wasn't seeing? Go back to that house, Marina ordered. Now, ma'am? Now. The driver turned around and went back to the quiet street. The small house still had its light on. Marina looked at it, her heart pounding. She knew she was about to cross a line. This wasn't just giving money. This was invading someone's life, investigating, interfering. But what if those babies were in danger? What if Marcus was just a child being exploited? What if? The questions swirled in her mind like a whirlwind. She thought about just leaving, letting it go, calling some authority in the morning, and forgetting she had seen anything. But she couldn't. Because there was something in Marcus's eyes, something she recognized. Desperation, yes, but also determination, also love. He wasn't being forced, or was he? How could she know without asking? Marina opened the car door again. The rain had diminished to a light drizzle, but the cold still cut through. She walked to the house door, her expensive shoes sinking into muddy puddles. For a moment, she just stood there. What would she say? "Hello, I followed your son for 20 minutes and now I want to know what's going on?" That sounded insane, invasive, but the alternative seemed far worse. Ignore it, pretend she hadn't seen a thing, return to her mansion and forget that people were struggling to survive just a few miles away. No, she wouldn't do that. Marina took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Silence for a few seconds, then slow footsteps. The door opened with a creak, revealing a woman about 60 years old. Gray hair pulled back in a messy bun, tired face, wrinkled not just by age, but by the weight of worries that Marina could only imagine. The woman looked Marina up and down. Expensive clothes, confident posture, clearly not someone from the neighborhood. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her voice guarded. Marina chose her words carefully. "I followed a boy here, Marcus. He had 2 babies. I need to know if they're safe." The woman didn't seem surprised. Not hostile either, just tired, as if she'd had this conversation before. "You're not the first to ask," she said calmly. And then, something Marina never expected happened. The woman opened the door completely and said, "You should see for yourself." The house was simple, humble, but there was warmth there, cleanliness, care. In the corner of the small living room, 2 makeshift cribs. Inside them, the 2 babies she had seen in the rain, now sleeping soundly, peaceful, protected. Clean blankets. Bottles organized on the side table. Marina had expected to find a criminal operation. Squalor, neglect, exploitation. But this wasn't a scene of abuse. It looked like a home. "Those are my daughter's babies," the grandmother began, her voice trembling slightly. "She died in childbirth 3 months ago. Complications we couldn't afford to treat in time." She paused, her eyes fixed on the sleeping children. "The boy you saw, he's my son, the uncle of these babies." Marina felt the ground move beneath her feet. In her years building an empire, she had proudly developed the ability to read people, to separate truth from manipulation, to see through the masks people wear. But there, in that humble house, all her certainties crumbled in a second. The boy wasn't exploiting those children. He was saving them. The grandmother continued, sitting heavily in an old chair. "I'm too old to work full-time. I have health problems. I live on a minimal pension that barely pays for food. When my daughter died and left these 2 little angels," her voice failed. "We had no choice. Someone needed to put food on the table. Someone needed to make sure we didn't lose this house." At that moment, the door opened again. The boy entered, still wet from the rain, his eyes tired. When he saw Marina sitting in his home's living room, he froze. Fear and confusion flashed across his face, too young to carry so much weight. "It's okay," the grandmother rushed to say. She just wanted to know if the babies were safe. The boy didn't relax. His shoulders remained tense, defensiveness still present in every muscle of his thin body. Marina observed him with new eyes. He wasn't an exploiter. He wasn't a criminal. He was a child forced to become an adult before his time. "How old are you?" she asked gently. 15, he replied, his voice low. "I turned 15 last month. 15 years old, and already bearing the weight of 2 babies and a sick grandmother." The grandmother continued the story that the boy clearly couldn't bring himself to tell. "He dropped out of school 2 months ago. Said he needed to work." Tears welled up in her eyes. But what kind of work could a 15-year-old possibly find? With no experience, no credentials, nothing? Marina thought about her own empire, the hundreds of employees, The rigorous hiring processes, requirements, certifications, minimum experience. All the barriers that make sense in the corporate world, but that build insurmountable walls for people like Marcus. So he started begging, Marina completed, finally understanding the entire pattern. It's not begging, the boy interrupted, a spark of wounded pride in his eyes. I work. I go out during peak hours, when people are most willing to help, and I take care of them. He pointed to the babies. Every night, I change diapers. I prepare bottles. I put them to sleep. While Grandma rests, the grandmother covered her face with her hands. He's too young for this, but we have no choice. We have no one. We have nothing. Marina felt something tighten in her chest. The routine revealed itself in all its brutality. The boy worked on the streets during rush hours, came home to care for the babies during the night while the grandmother, exhausted and sick, got a few hours of rest. Then, the cycle would begin again. Day after day. No school, no childhood. No hope that this would change. It was like a hamster wheel of despair. The more he struggled, the more trapped he became. And with each passing day, the pit of hopelessness grew deeper. Didn't you seek help? Marina asked, knowing it was an obvious question but needing to hear the answer. Social services? Government programs? The look the grandmother gave her was one of pure pain. We tried. God knows we tried. The waiting list stretches on for months, the boy explained. His voice weighted with a bitterness no child should know. They promised to call eventually, but in the meantime, hunger doesn't pause. Rent won't wait. And there was another problem, the grandmother added, her voice trembling. They threatened to take the babies, put them in temporary homes, separated, in different families. No, the boy said with fierce determination, his fists clenched. I promised my sister. In the hospital, before I held her hand and promised I would take care of the boys, that they would grow up together, that they would be a family. His words came out like a sacred vow. I won't let them take them. I won't let them separate them. Marina felt tears sting her own eyes. This wasn't a simple rescue story. There was no clear villain to fight against. The enemy was the system itself, the bureaucracy that moved too slowly, the policies that separated families instead of supporting them, the poverty that forced children to become providers. Everything she had assumed was wrong. Her conclusions mistaken. Her judgments hasty. But her initial compassion, that first impulse to care when she saw a boy in the rain protecting two babies, that was right. She just didn't know yet how deep that hole of need went. Marina leaned forward, hands clasped tightly. What if I could help you find a solution? A way to keep your family together while getting the support you desperately need? The boy stared at her with eyes that had already seen many broken promises. Everyone says that. Then they leave and forget. She couldn't blame him for his distrust. How many people had stopped, given a few coins, felt good about themselves and moved on? How many had promised to come back and never returned? The grandmother, however, seemed to want to believe. She leaned forward, hope fighting against years of disappointment. What would really help? In the long term? Stability, Marina said thoughtfully. Not just money. You need real support. Childcare so you can breathe. A way for him to go back to school without you losing income. Legal protection to ensure no one separates this family. The grandmother nodded vigorously, tears now streaming. Yes, exactly that. But where do we find that? Who cares enough to do more than give charity and feel sorry? Before Marina could answer, the boy interrupted, his voice harsh. And money. Let's be honest. Rent is due in a week. If we don't pay, we'll be evicted. And then it doesn't matter if anyone cares or not. We'll be on the street. The urgency of the situation hit Marina like a punch. She had spent the morning negotiating million-dollar contracts, discussing quarterly strategies, planning expansions that would take years to materialize. But here, this wasn't about creating a beautiful long-term support plan. There was a time bomb ticking every second. 1 week, 7 days. And then this family, already so fragile, would shatter completely. She looked at the babies sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the crisis unfolding around them. She looked at the grandmother, bent under the weight of losses no mother should bear. She looked at the 15-year-old boy with 40-year-old eyes, and she made a decision she knew would change everything. I can't just walk away from this, she said, more to herself than to them. I can't pretend I didn't see. That I don't know. The boy crossed his arms, still defensive. So what are you going to do? Give money and feel like you saved the day? No, she replied firmly. I run a foundation. We exist precisely for situations like this. For families the system is failing. For children forced to grow up too fast. For babies who deserve more than makeshift cribs and an income from handouts. Something sparkled in the grandmother's eyes. Hope. Dangerous, painful hope. But Marina continued, being honest. However, I need to do this the right way. Verify everything. Involve the appropriate channels. ensure legal protections so no one can take these babies from you, connect you with real services, not just promise and disappear. How long does that take? The boy asked, suspicion still heavy in his voice. A week, she said. Give me a week. Trust me for 7 days. The silence that followed was heavy. The boy looked at the grandmother. The grandmother looked at the babies. Marina waited, knowing she was asking for something immense. Trust. A word worn thin by those who had learned its cruelty the hard way. Where pretty words dissolve the moment reality intrudes. Where promises are crafted with ease and shattered even more quickly. Everyone says that, the boy repeated, but his voice was weaker now. More tired, as if part of him desperately wanted to believe, but already had too many scars. They say trust me, and then they forget. Then they move on with their lives and we're still here. Still hungry, still scared, still alone. Marina held his gaze. I know you have no reason to believe me. I know I'm just another person who showed up and made promises. But I'm asking anyway. 7 days. Give me a week and I'll prove that some people keep their word. The grandmother gently touched the boy's arm. Son, what do we have to lose? If she doesn't come back, we'll be in the same situation. But what if she does come back? What if she really can help? The boy looked at the babies, his nephews, the children for whom he had sacrificed his own childhood. The promise he made to his dying sister. And something in him broke. Just a little. Enough to let in a thread of hope. 1 week, he finally said, his voice hoarse. But when you don't come back, when this is just another broken promise, I'll remember. And I'll never trust anyone again. It was a deal loaded with pain and desperation. But it was a deal. Marina stood up, knowing the clock was already ticking. 7 days to mobilize her foundation. 7 days to find real solutions to systemic problems. 7 days to prove she was different from all the other people who had passed through and moved on. I'll be back, she promised, looking at each of them. With real help. With real change. 7 days. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back one last time. The boy was standing beside the cribs now, a protective hand over each sleeping baby. The grandmother was watching her, hands clasped as if in prayer. A family broken by the system, held together only by the sheer willpower of a child. As she stepped back out into the rain, one question echoed in her mind. Could she keep this promise? Could she solve in 1 week what the system had failed to do in months? This family's life depended on it. That boy's faith in the world depended on it. And the clock was ticking. The 7 days passed. Marina returned to that house. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her, a social worker, a legal consultant, and a childcare specialist. Her foundation's entire team. The car stopped in front of the gate of that humble house, and for a moment, she felt her heart racing. What if it had been too late? What if the promise she made could no longer be kept? Because what she was about to reveal wasn't just financial help. It was something no family in that situation had ever received. The door opened slowly. The grandmother appeared, her face marked by a mixture of hope and fear. Her eyes moved from Marina to the team beside her, trying to decipher what this meant. Behind her, the boy emerged, hands in his pockets, his gaze cautious but desperate to believe. For 7 days, he had held his breath, trying not to create expectations but failing miserably. How many times had people promised to help and simply disappeared? Marina took a step forward. There was no more doubt in her voice, only absolute determination. I told you to trust me, and here's what we're going to do. What she revealed in the following minutes wasn't a mere check or fleeting charity. This wasn't the superficial, self-congratulatory solution wealthy people toss out to ease their conscience. It was a systematic, comprehensive plan that attacked every root of that problem. First, immediate stability. Rent paid for the next 6 months. Without the threat of eviction hanging over their heads, the family could finally breathe. But that was just the beginning. The grandmother needed rest, and the babies needed professional care. The solution? A qualified nanny, 4 days a week. Not to replace the grandmother, but to share the responsibility so she could be a grandmother. Not an exhausted nurse working 24 hours a day. So the boy could be an uncle, not an adolescent provider carrying the weight of an entire family on his shoulders. And his future? No longer a distant dream, but a promise taking shape. He would be re-enrolled in school, with comprehensive tutoring to bridge the gap stolen by circumstances. Scholarships were already being negotiated, transforming education from an impossible luxury into an unbreakable promise. The legal part? Complicated but essential. Custody would be formalized, with the grandmother as a legal guardian and the boy as co-responsible caregiver. No bureaucratic processes dragging the family through months of uncertainty and threats of separation. Everything documented, everything protected, everything legal. And the babies? Enrolled in a comprehensive pediatric program. Regular checkups, vaccinations, developmental monitoring. For the first time since they were born, they would have the medical care every child deserves. The boy looked at her, eyes welling up, voice breaking. "Why are you doing this?" She held his hands. "Because you shouldn't have to choose between your childhood and your family. And because systems that force that choice need to be destroyed." This wasn't charity. It was systemic intervention, attacking the root causes of poverty, not just the symptoms. Most people give a fish. Some teach how to fish. But Marina was doing something different. She was changing the entire ocean. In the months that followed, everything changed. The boy, who once wandered the streets with babies in his arms in the rain, now wore a school uniform. He sat in classrooms, absorbing knowledge that had been stolen from him. He studied at night, not because he needed to plan the next begging shift, but because he could finally dream of a future. His notebooks filled with notes. His tests showed grades that surprised even the teachers. He had been forced to grow up too fast, but that maturity now worked in his favor. The grandmother, who once carried the crushing weight of caring for twins alone while her body begged for rest, now laughed. She played with the babies without exhaustion hovering over every movement. When the professional caregiver arrived, she didn't feel guilt. She felt relief. Relief that there was finally support. That she was no longer fighting alone against a system that had abandoned her. The boy still visited, but now as an uncle, not as sole provider. He held the babies, told stories, played with them. But when night came, he went home, opened his books, and studied. His responsibility hadn't disappeared. It had been redefined. He was no longer the last line of defense. He was part of a support network that finally worked. One day, he looked at the billionaire during one of her visits and said something she would never forget. "I thought I had to do everything alone. I was wrong." The grandmother, holding one of the babies who was now reaching developmental milestones that once seemed impossible, added, "You didn't just help us. You showed us that systems can work when someone actually cares." The babies thrived. Medical checkups showed healthy weight gain, motor development on track, smiles that lit up any room. Those children, who began life in such desperate circumstances, now had a real chance. But the story didn't end there, because that family wasn't an isolated case. It was a pilot, a test, a proof of concept. The billionaire revealed her broader vision during a press conference months later. That family had been the first case, but her foundation had identified 47 similar situations in that city alone. 47. Let that sink in. 47 families trapped in the same vicious cycle of poverty, bureaucracy, and despair. 47 Marcuses sacrificing their childhoods. 47 invisible stories, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to stop and truly see. And now there was a program. Funds allocated, partnerships established. Her foundation was working with the city council to develop family preservation programs, systems that kept families together instead of tearing them apart. That provided support before desperation became a crisis. And the boy? He became an advocate, a spokesperson, someone who shared his story not to gain sympathy, but to build trust. He visited other families in similar situations and told them, "I know it's hard to trust. I didn't trust either. I looked at well-dressed people making promises and thought, you'll leave and I'll still be here. But sometimes the system can work. Sometimes the promises are real." His voice mattered because he had lived it. He wasn't a bureaucrat with a rehearsed speech. He wasn't a politician with memorized statistics. He was a teenager who had begged in the rain with babies in his arms and was now on his way to a college education. His existence was proof that systemic change was possible. The message was clear. Individual compassion is powerful. It can change a day, a week, maybe a month. But individual compassion plus systemic change, that creates sustainable impact. That transforms not just one life, but entire communities. That breaks cycles that lasted generations. 2 years later, Marina reflected on that rainy day. "I almost moved on that day. Like everyone else." She paused, looking out her office window. "We see poverty and make assumptions. A boy begging with babies. Must be exploitation, we think. Must be a scheme. Must be something wrong with him. Our minds create comfortable narratives that justify our inaction." She turned, eyes steady. But behind that rain-soaked scene was a teenager sacrificing everything for family. And the real question isn't who is caring. It's why our systems force children to become providers. She leaned forward. How many others are invisible because we judge before we understand? How many stories remain hidden because it's easier to look the other way? The final scene shows the boy, now 19, wearing a high school graduation gown. He holds his diploma, eyes shining. Beside him, his grandmother, now healthier, more rested, more alive. And the babies, now toddlers, running, laughing, reaching milestones that once seemed impossible. Marina is there too, not as a savior but as sustained support. She didn't disappear after the headlines. She stayed, visited, kept investing not just money but time, attention, presence. The boy looks at her. "You gave the babies a childhood. You gave me back mine. His grandmother adds, her voice heavy with emotion. You gave them a chance. You gave us all one. The boy holds his diploma, his voice steady. I learned that caring isn't just sacrifice. It's accepting help to care better. And in that moment, the circle completes itself. The initial vulnerability transformed into resilience. But not solitary resilience. Resilience built on support, systems that work, and people who refuse to look the other way. Stories like these happen every day, yet remain invisible. They're hidden in the streets we rush through, in the corners we avoid, in the faces we choose not to see. Each of these unseen narratives waits for someone willing to pause, to truly observe, to transform fleeting curiosity into life-changing action. How many times have you passed someone and made an instant assumption? How many times has judgment overpowered curiosity? How many times have you created a complete story about someone's life based on 3 seconds of observation? This boy was standing in the rain with babies in his arms, and everyone assumed the worst. Exploitation, scam, manipulation. But the truth was more complex, more beautiful, more desperate than any quick judgment could capture. Marina discovered this because she chose to ask the question no one else was asking. What's really happening here? If this story moved you, imagine what else remains hidden in plain sight. How many other teenagers are sacrificing their childhoods because systems failed them? How many other grandmothers are struggling alone because bureaucracy matters more than humanity? Here's the profound truth this story reveals. Transformation began when Marina chose to look beyond surface appearances. Not with a donation check, not with hasty performative charity, but through a deliberate commitment to follow, inquire, understand, and then create lasting systemic change. You've just witnessed how individual compassion can become sustainable impact when paired with intentional, thoughtful action. By simply stopping to ask questions, we can uncover truths that don't just alter one life, but can reshape entire communities. Share this story, not because it's beautiful, but because it challenges each of us to question our own assumptions, to consider that maybe, the next time we see someone in desperation, the question isn't, what's wrong with them, but rather, what's wrong with the systems that put them there? And the most important question of all, what can I do, not just today, but sustainably, to change them? Want to uncover more stories that reveal truths hidden in plain sight? Subscribe, because sometimes, truly following a story reveals far more than we ever expected about individuals, about societal systems, and most importantly, about ourselves.